Stalin is the great leader who defeated fascism and built socialism. He is an infallible leader who led the country to prosperity. Stalin had to use repressions and many other glorious words of propaganda of Stalin. But was it really so? No. Stalin and his actions, repressions, left a deep mark on the history of Kazakhstan, turning into one of its most tragic chapters. The scale of political persecutions carried out during the reign of Joseph Stalin is striking in scope and cruelty. The main instruments of terror were mass arrests, interrogations with the use of torture, shooting, and exile to remote areas of the country, to the Gulag, Algiers, and Antisy. Some of the most called for repressed are Arham Tihan, Signasi Food, Monarch Life, being get money, and etc. So let us now take a deeper look at the scale and consequences of Stalin repressions in Kazakhstan.
Demographic changes in Kazakhstan due to Stalinist repressions had profound and lasting impact. In 1926, the population was around 6.5 million. By 1939, this number had dropped to about 5.5 million as a result of increased mortality and decreased birth rate. Approximately 1,000 people fell victim to these repressions, with 25,000 to 30,000 executed, leaving many families without breadwinners. Kazakhstan became a site of mass deportation, including around 400,000 Germans in 1941, along with other ethnic groups. During this period, mortality rates surged, while the birth rate remained low throughout the 1940s, slowing demographic growth. By 1959, the population had recovered to about 6.5 million. But these demographic changes not only reshaped the number, but also transformed Kazakh society in ways that continue to be felt today.
The social consequences of Stalin repression in Kazakhstan were devastating and long-lasting, affecting every aspect of life. First, loss of trust and fear. The population developed a fear of the authorities, which stirred activity in state of trust between people because no one could be sure that they will not be subject to repression tomorrow. Second, the formation of multicultural society. On the one hand, deportation and forced resettlement of people led to the emergence of multinational societies in Kazakhstan. According to the 1939 census, Kazakhs made up about 30% of the population, while Russians accounted for 40%. By 1959, after the end of repression, the Kazakh population had risen to 32%, but Russians and other ethnic groups remained significant. The forced coexistence of different ethnic groups led to the cultural exchange that later became the future of Kazakh culture. Initially, however, it was a heavy burden for many people who found themselves in unfamiliar conditions and had to adapt to a new life. In the long term, the consequences of the repression affected the socio-economic development of the region, slowing down the integration of different ethnic groups and creating tensions.
In the late 1920s, Soviet collectivization forced Kazakh nomads to abandon herding, leading to economic collapse. Livestock numbers dropped 90%, causing a famine from 1930 to 1933 that killed up to 2 million people, mostly ethnic Kazakhs. The economy became dependent on Moscow, limiting local control. Political repressions peaked during the Stalinist purges from 1936 to 1938, with Kazakh intellectuals and citizens arrested or executed, and thousands dying in Gulag camps. Kazakh historian and professor Zadhan Kinatoli presented that the repression of the 1930s tragedy, the destruction of the national elite, damaged the development of Kazakh statehood and culture, which slowed down the process of creating a national identity and hindered development for many decades to come.
Collectivization was a policy of the Soviet government from 1929 to 1933, aimed at transforming traditional agriculture in the USSR. Under this policy, peasants were forced to abandon their individual farms and join large collective farms or kolkhozes. Opponents of collectivization faced confiscation of property, arrests, and exile. Many peasants protested by destroying livestock and property, leading to significant losses and growing discontent. The social uprising was one of the major movements in the early 1930s. However, the government continued to confiscate food to finance industrialization, leading to the mass famine of 1932-33 and the deaths of millions of people.
Following the dissolution of Soviet Union, rehabilitation processes were initiated. The 1991 law established a legal framework for restoring the rights of victims. By 2020, more than 16,000 individuals had been rehabilitated, including notable figures such as the poet Mukan Tolibayev and other representatives of the intelligentsia. The rehabilitation process continues, and the government acknowledges the necessity of researching and memorializing the victims. Memorial projects such as Algiers plays a key role in preserving historical memory. Thus, the rehabilitation of repressions victims is not only a legal process, but also a step toward restoring historical justice and strengthening the national identity of Kazakhstan.
President Nazarbayev called the policy of collectivization and repression the greatest tragedy for millions of people. Kassym-Jomart Tokayev also acknowledges the scale of the tragedy. Stalinist repressions in Kazakhstan had consequences for the population and cultural heritage. Mass arrests, executions, deportations, and famines led to huge demographic losses and destroyed the traditional culture of Kazakhstan.